Okay, so I want to get into this. Okay, so we're going to get into the sugya of shomer shemasar l'shomer, which is what happens when one shomer. We may have touched upon it before the end of last. We introduced it perhaps at the very end of last, before Pesach. But it's the question is when one person gives over the item to someone else to watch. So you gave your item to Reuven. Reuven went ahead and gave it over to Shimon. So there's a few questions you could ask on this. And we're going to go through each of the scenarios, okay? But in order to, we're just going to go through the Gemara. It's a little bit of a complicated sugya, and we'll introduce it this week. So it's on page 7 in the booklet, which is on Bava Metzia Daf Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. It says like this: Itmar, shomer shemasar l'shomer. A shomer gave it over to another shomer. So one shomer gave it over to someone else. Rav Omar Potter, Rabbi Yochanan Omar Chayev. Rav says you're Potter. The first guy is Potter for doing that. Rav Yochanan says the first guy is Chayev. So what's the scenario? What's the svara here? Amar Abaye. Abaye explains. The Taimi de Rav, according to Rav, that shomer shemasar l'shomer is Potter. Loi mi boya shomer chinam shemasar l'shomer sachar. The iluye alye l'shmirasai. Not only a shomer chinam who gave it over to a shomer sachar, that he upgraded the shmira. So you gave it over to a free watchman. That free watchman went ahead and hired someone to watch it for him. So you now upgraded the shmira. You're for sure the first person is not chayiv for doing that. You can't say he was negligent because he gave it over to someone else when the person he gave it over to is signing up for a higher level shmira than even the first person took upon himself. However, ela filu migragare l'shmirasai pater. Even if he was migareya the shmira, so there was a shomer sachar who went ahead and gave it over to a shomer chinam. A paid watchman gave it over to a shomer chinam. Still, the paid watchman who started off is potter for doing that. He's potter. Now, he's potter from what? So just to chaz over. Besides the fact that you pay a shomer sachar, you also expect a higher level of shmira. So a shomer sachar has to watch things in a more careful way. He also takes upon himself more responsibility. So the shomer chinam is only obligated to pay, he's only chayiv for pshia. If he was negligent. If he wasn't negligent, he's not chayiv to pay. So he's not b'chlal chayiv to pay if he was not negligent. The shomer chinam. And if it was
liability is on the first guy.
What?
Liability is on.
Well, let's just speak this over. And shomer sachar has to pay even for Geneva Aveda. Is it too low?
It's too low.
Okay. Shomer chinam is shomer sachar. Shomer sachar has to pay even if it was stolen or lost and he was not negligent. As long as it's not an oines, he's chayiv. He's not chayiv on oines, something which is beyond his control. So we just said over in Rav, the Rav says that shomer shemasar l'shomer is potter, and the first person was a shomer chinam, the second one is a shomer sachar, the first one is potter. And the reason, says Abaye, is the hamasra lebendas. You can't say I did anything wrong because I gave it over to someone who's a bendas. So what does the Gemara mean here? So Rashi says, Rav Omar Potter, Mikol Mashaya Niftar im Shomrahu. He's Potter for anything that he would have been Potter from had he been watching it. That means that according to Rashi, according to Rav, we're going to focus on Rav today, even though we don't pass it like Rav, but I think the fundamentals will come out from Rav. Rav says, according to Rashi, the main point of Rav is that it's not considered negligent on the part of the first shomer to give it over to someone else. Even though the owner entrusted me, since I gave it over to someone who I believe to be responsible, that itself that I gave it over is not called a pshia. That itself is not called being negligent. And since that's not called being negligent, I can fulfill my responsibility of shmirah through him. So therefore, as long as he was careful, then I can now go back to the owner and say, look, we were careful, I was careful, I gave it over to him, he was careful, and now something like a geneva v'aveda happened, I'm off the hook.
I started with the assumption that it's an accepted practice for a shomer to be able to delegate.
That is the whole chiddush of Rav, according to this. The Masra Lebendas says that now, the Rishonim all do speak out that he's not allowed to do this. L'chatchila. But it's just not considered a pshia if he did. Because, like you're saying, you have to ask my permission as an owner if you're allowed to just go ahead and give it over to someone else who I did not entrust with the item. So you're correct in your assumption that you're not allowed to do this. But Rav's point is that it's not called a pshia for doing it. Rav's point is that it's not called a pshia for doing it. Okay? So, therefore, since it's not a pshia, so nobody was pesheya, I am still responsible to the first, I'm still the shomer, according to Rashi. The first guy, the first shomer chinam is still considered the shomer to the owner. But he could go back to the owner and said, look, I wasn't negligent. I gave it over to a bendas. I gave it to a responsible person. The responsible person told me that he watched it. He watched it properly. He was careful with it. There was no negligence here. It was stolen or lost. And therefore, I'm off the hook and he's off the hook and we're all potter. That's how Rashi learns the case. Okay? Now, let's say that the second person was negligent. Let's say the second guy was negligent. Okay? You hear the case?
The second guy was a shomer sofer, right?
The second guy was a shomer chinam, let's say. The first shomer chinam gave it over to another shomer chinam. And now the second guy was posheah. So now the first one is now chayiv to the owner, because he's going to tell the owner and say, look, oh, Mr. Owner, I did not do a pshia by giving it over to the bendas. But unfortunately, the bendas, I was not negligent by giving it over to the second shomer. But the second guy, he did not watch it properly. Unbeknownst to me, I thought he was a responsible person, and he was posheya. He was negligent with the item. So the owner will tell me, well, look, so then you basically tried to have someone else fulfill your responsibility, but you weren't successful in that, and therefore I'm coming after you, and you have to pay me now.
Why do we look at it that way? Why don't we look at it like any method of shmirah, whether it's a human or not? I put it in a safe. It turns out that the manufacturer messed up with the safe and it was easily breakable. So now you're going to come after me. I did my due diligence of watching it. You want to go after the safe manufacturer? There's no day. Take him to court. But what does that do with me?
So I'll be Mekayim, he's my shliach to do my shlichus. He's my shliach. He's my shliach for my shmirah. And therefore, since he was pesheya, so it's like I was pesheya.
Why can't we look at it as...
Because I have a responsibility to watch it.
I have a and I put it in a safe location.
No, that's not. You have to be actively watching, and therefore the way I'm actively watching is by giving it to him.
If I put it in a safe, I travel to Israel for 6 months.
So it could be that the actively watching is that you put it into a safe spot that you're in charge of. But by giving it to someone else, there still has to be somebody that's watching it.
I put it in a safe deposit box in the bank, right? And it turned out the bank was doing construction, they moved it all, and they weren't careful. So here, you gave it to another shomer. I didn't ask you to do that. I'm like, no, it's just good that the bank is able to move it. But so that now there's a human involved, it's considered like he's my shliach.
Okay. Okay. I mean, you didn't give it to them as a shomer. I don't know exactly.
I'm saying that is my shmirah. My shmirah is I'm giving it.
My shmirah is that I'm having another person being shomer. But he's my shliach to be shomer, and if he's posher, then I'm posher.
If I say watch my house and I go out of town and I hire a security company to watch the house for me because I'm not going to be there, so that's considered now it's a shliach, and if he's posher, then I'm posher.
Well, because I didn't give you over the permission to give it over to him. I really want you to answer to me. I trust you. You're saying you trust him, fine. But the bottom line is that your shmir is being mekuyim through him, and therefore
It's objective. It's not a matter of I trust him. This is a trustworthy way of doing things. I hired a security company. I got a responsible person to take care of it.
okay. So that's not how Rashi's looking. That's not how Rashi's looking
No,
at
I
it.
understand.
I'm saying it could be that the sea has changed. It could be Rashi that we have now that we have security systems and companies that come in. If I hire armed guards to watch your thing with my house,
That's still considered in my possession. But here you gave it over to someone else.
so it could be that
So
I
then,
put something in a bank and I put it in the safety deposit
Okay,
box in
fine.
the bank. It might be
let's
that.
get through the other shitas. Let's get through the other shitas, and we'll see how it all plays out. What were you saying?
Kind of that there's no difference. Mere fact, the humans involved.
You're saying that? Okay. So that's Rashi's shita. The Ramban, before we go to the Ramban, there is a Ritva, and I think the Ritva is saying what you're saying. The Ritva, which is, I made the copy, it's on this back side, it's this two-sided copy. One in the Ritva is like, it's the one that looks like this, it's in Rashi's script. The Ritva says like this: Shomer shemasnu l'shomer is pater. Afilu shomer sachar degure gare l'shmirasai. Even a shomer chinam, a shomer sachar gave it to a shomer chinam, and the shomer chinam maybe watched it, but there was a gneva v'aveda. Still, the shomer sachar is pater. So says the Ramban. Says the Ritva: Yesh shapirish degara legamri sheilu nigneva inevda. Hare Arishan Gamkein Potter. So this is an unbelievable case. You hire a Shomer Sachar to watch it. The Shomer Sachar, the paid watchman who's responsible to have a higher level, he gave it over to a Shomer Chinam. And the Shomer Chinam watched it, and he was not negligent, but there was a Gneva Vaveda. Now, Shomer Chinam is Potter from Gneva Vaveda, but Shomer Sachar is Chayiv in Gneva Vaveda. So says the Ritva, since I gave it over to a Shomer, a Ben Das, I'm off the hook completely. I'm potter from everything. So this is not like Rashi. Rashi says you're only potter from that which you were potter from originally. He's saying you're potter off the hook completely. So that's what you were saying, I think. Is that giving over to Ben Das is my kiyum of my shmira.
I mean, according to the way I was saying it, you would be chayav because you know what I'm saying, because I'm telling you that the fact that he's a human is irrelevant. It's a safe way of storing.
Right. So
if
that,
I put it in my safe.
right. So here I gave it to a Ben Das. That's the point.
And it was stolen from my safe. I'd be chayav. I'm a shomer sachar. So okay, so I gave it to my safe, which happens to be a human, and it was stolen. So I'm chayav. I don't want
The difference between the two is the bank, it's a paid cost. Give it to the Shomer Chinam. I'm a Shomer Sachar, so
no, so you're right. So he's learning differently. The Ritva is learning something else. The Ritva is learning. The Ritva is learning a different lumdis. No, I'm sorry. The Ritva is learning. Right, the Ritva is learning something else. The Ritva is learning. I mean, he's going to argue, but the Yesh Shapirish in the Ritva is learning another extreme from Rashi completely, which is that since I gave it over to a Ben Das, I have the ability to basically remove myself and put someone else as the shomer to the owner, and basically I'm now removed from the whole case. If since this is a Ben Das,
then you shouldn't get paid.
no, probably doesn't get paid. I'm assuming he stops getting paid at the point that he gives it
Even
over.
if it wasn't stolen.
Right.
But again, the
At that point, the Ritva is learning. The Reb Chaim says that the pshat is called uki gavra b'charikai. I placed someone in my spot. I have someone else taking over for me, and since someone else came over to take over for me, he's now your shomer. I'm not your shomer anymore.
It's a lesser, but he takes in a lesser.
Oh, that's the Ritva's kasha. The Ritva's kasha is 1 second, but you're a shomer sachar. You're not allowed to back out in middle.
Besides Shomer Sachar, you're having a lesser watching. So what you pay what you get. You get what you pay for.
Right. See, this is my kasha.
The owner has to be willing to have it washed by a shomer chinam.
He obviously wanted to
Right,
pay
right.
something.
Meaning this case where you went from a shomer sachar down is a little bit of a chiddush because we learned last zman before Pesach that the difference between shomer sachar is not that just that he takes on more responsibility to pay. It's a higher level of watching also. We said he's not allowed to take a lunch break. There's certain things he's not allowed to do, which I paid for. So definitely by backing out, I'm not going to get paid. But who says that's where it was kasha? V'lesadim kein nimtza shomer sachar yachol lifter atzmai v'lachser kashomer chinam. Let's say shomer sachar would go to the owner and say, I don't want to get paid anymore. I'm just going to become a shomer chinam. You can't do that unilaterally. You already took upon yourself the responsibility and willingness to get paid.
Even according to the CHO?
Right, so that's his kasha. That's his kasha on the Sri Shomer.
Then you just
But
give it to someone else and have them give it back to you.
what?
If you could do it, then just give it to
Right,
and then have the shomer
Right, exactly, right. So basically, this first sheet, second shita, which is the first opinion in the Ritva, is the opposite extreme of Rashi. We'll say like this: Rashi holds that really the first shomer was 100% responsible to answer to the owner. The first shomer is 100% responsible to answer to the owner, and he has to deal with the owner, and he could tell the owner, I made a shliach, but it's really it's on me. And whatever I'm pater from, I'm still pater from, whatever I'm chayiv for, I'm still chayiv on, and nothing changed as far as the owner is concerned. As far as the owner is concerned, he still deals with the first shomer, and the shomer is allowed to have someone else watch on his behalf for him. If that second guy messes up, then he has to pay. If he didn't mess up, he doesn't have to pay. The Ritva is saying, b'shem the Yeshayimrim, that the lumdus of shomer shemasel shomer is uki gaver b'charikoi, is that I can go ahead and remove myself from the shmira and put someone else to be the shomer, even if I was a shomer sachar and the new guy is a shomer chinam. Now the Ritva doesn't like that, but what the Ritva is okay with is the same thing as the Ramban, which is a middle of the road, which is, if it's shomer chinam to shomer chinam, it could be there they hold of the lumdus of the Ritva. So let's say the first person was a shomer chinam, a free non-paid watchman, and he goes ahead and gives it over to another non-paid watchman. Then what happens is that since the second guy is trustworthy, then the first shomer can remove himself from the picture, and he can place a new shomer there, who's now considered the shomer to the owner. And that's the chiddush of shomer shemasel shomer. So according to that, when it says that the first guy is potter, he's really potter completely now. He's potter completely. Because even if there would be something that he would be chayav on, let's say the second guy was posheya, who has to pay? According to the Rashi, the first one has to pay, but according to the Ramban, the second one pays.
The second one's also going to have to pay, even according to Rashi.
No, but the second one pays to the first one, and the first one pays to the owner. The nafkamina, says the Ramban, is what if the second guy has no money? Who takes the loss? If the second guy has no money, right? So who's going to take the loss? According to Rashi, the owner is Ruvain, the first shomer is Shimon, the second shomer is Levi. Ruvain is the owner, he gave it to Shimon, Shimon gave it to Levi, everyone's the same level. Ruvain's the owner, he gave it over to Shimon to watch it for him for free. Shimon gave it over to Levi to watch for him for free. Okay? At the end, Levi is negligent. Ruvain wants his money back. So according to Rashi, the way it's going to work is that Ruvain goes to Shimon and says, "Where's my item?" He says, "Well, your item got lost. Your item, something happened to it." How? Well, it was left out in the street, and a guy, stepped on it, and it got damaged, and there was no shmira. It was negligence. Okay, so pay me. So Shimon has to pay Ruvain. Now, Shimon can now probably go to Levi and say, "Hey, Levi, pay me, reimburse me, because I gave it to you to watch and you messed up." But as far as the owner is concerned, he still deals with Shimon. But according to the Ramban, since Shimon gave over the Shemira to Levi, and Levi's on the same level as Shimon, now Levi took over Shimon's position, and Reuben comes to Shimon and says, "Where's my item?" "Oh, I don't know, I gave it to Levi, he's your Shomer, deal with him." He goes to Levi.
Reuben could find out that Shimon was Bosher by giving it to Levi.
No, that's the whole chiddush of Shomer Shemasel Shomer Potter, according to Rav. That Masr Ben Das is not a pshia. Not only it's not a pshia, it's even the ability to uki gavi b'charikoi, that you can make another shomer in your place. That is the chiddush according to this Gemara, according to Rav, that you could go ahead and give it to someone else. Not could. I'm not saying you could. It could be lechatchil, you can't, but if you did, it works. And therefore, Reuven goes to Shimon. Shimon says,
Das is the bar here?
Yeah.
Like, there's a reason why I gave it to Shimon.
That's the Gemara. That's the lashon of the Gemara. The Gemara says, Potter. The Masr Ben Das. If you look at the Ramban inside, the Ramban says Shomer Shemasel Shomer Potter Pirish Legamri V'loi Mishtoi Dina Bahadei Klal. And Reuben does not deal with Shimon at all. She'im Shomer Sachar Hu Harishain Umasel shomer sachar sheni, if they're equal. Kam hasheni tachtov. The second one replaces the first. Umishtoi bailim dina ba'dei sheni. And the owner has to deal with the second guy. So now Ruvain has to deal with Levi, and Shimon is now out of the picture. And this is the chiddush of shomer shemasel shomer, according to the Ramban. The Amalei uki gaver b'chari koi. Now, the trick.
Why does the Ramban say shomer sachar? You should just say.
Okay, I think he's coming lafuke. Another case, as opposed to the following case.
Before you go to a new case, Avram Eliezer mentioned something that was just because he gave it to that guy for a reason. When you say they're on the same level, they're both trustworthy. That you, if you're choosing somebody to,
I trust this guy.
You trust this guy, and you didn't choose the other guy because you trusted this guy. Maybe his judgment is not as good as yours, or how can you claim that everybody's on the same level in trustworthiness?
Haraya, he was Moshe.
Right.
And he has no money to give it back.
And he has no money to give back.
Didn't we have this last year, before Pesach? If I'm a shomer and I don't want to be the shomer anymore, could I just knock on your door and say, I know you paid me for the month, but it's a week?
No, so we asked that question. The Ketzois asked the kasha that a shomer sachar is just a poyel and poyel achzor but mitzvah yom, and maybe still having the items bechayiv you. Right, but first of all, here that's the chiddush of the Gemara according to Rav, is that since you put someone else there, so then I'm not just backing out. I'm giving you someone else to do it, and that's a kiyum of it somehow. You want to know where's your chiyuv hashava or something? I don't know. You're putting.
It could be. Why don't we look at it that when I give it to the next person, I'm in essence telling the owner who's not around, I quit, and I'm doing you a chesed of finding you a person to take over, because right now there's nobody to watch it.
I don't know if you can just quit. That's the question. You can't just quit because there's a chiyuv hashava on the item. So I don't know how you fulfilled that. It's something more than that. It's called uki gaver b'chari koi. I placed someone else to take on the shmira.
Otherwise I'm not allowed to.
Right. Otherwise I can't just back out.
Yeah.
Now the question on the Ramban is though, what if you went down a level? Which was the question of the Ritva, right? The Ritva kind of said this, but the Ritva brought a Yeshurim that says it even if he goes down a level. So what happens if I gave it to a shomer sachar? I had a paid watchman, and he doesn't pay someone else, but he gives it over to a free watchman. So now what's the deal? What's the halacha? So here it's very interesting what happens. What happens is we have Rashi, we have the Ritva, and we have Rashi, and we have Rashi is everything's with the first guy. The Ramban says when it's equal, everything's with the second guy. The Ritva even said even when it's not equal, everything's with the second guy. But what happens if it's not equal according to the Ramban? So here, what comes out is an interesting pshara. That it comes out that the first person, the owner, has two shomerim on this item. Legabe pshia, the shomer is the second one, is Levi, because Levi is a shomer chinam. So anything that a shomer chinam is responsible for, Shimon can tell Ruvain's the owner, Shimon's the first shomer, and Levi was negligent. So Shimon can tell Ruvain, I made you a shomer. He was supposed to watch it. He didn't watch it. It's his problem. You got to deal with it. But let's say he did watch it and something happens that the Levi's potter on. On that, you can't put someone in your place that is not doing the level of shmirah that you were supposed to do, and therefore, legabi that extra level of shmirah that's mechayev shomer sachar in Geneva Vaveda that he kept to himself. So it comes out that when you go down a level, now it splits. The watching of a shomer sachar, the first one's still chayiv. The watching of a shomer chinam, the second one is now chayiv, and the owner now has to deal with both. Right. That's what will come out. So this is all according to Rav, okay? So this is Rav's Shita, and Rav holds Shomer Shemasel Shomer is Potter, and we're saying Potter means that you didn't do anything wrong by giving it over. What else? So according to Rashi, that's it. It just means you didn't do anything wrong by giving it over, and therefore, whatever you're still chayiv for, you're still chayiv as the first Shomer, and as long as there was no pshia, you're Potter. According to the Ritva's first shot, it goes over to completely to the second person. According to the Ramban and the Rashba and the Ritva himself, most of the Rishonim then it depends. Whatever, if you have someone that's taking on exactly the responsibilities that you had, you could replace yourself with the second person and now exempt yourself from the claim completely. And even if the second guy has no money, you don't have to deal with it.
Well, what happens if the Baal Bus says, Reuben says to Shimon, I'm only dealing with you. I don't know Levi. I don't know who he is. I don't know if I can even trust him.
So we're gonna
he's not a Baal Achrayis.
Right. That's what the Olam is asking. So I'm just gonna let you know, just so that you should be able to, shouldn't get so worked up, have too much anxiety until next week. Is that we don't pass like Rav. This is a machlekes Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, and according to the Maskana of the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan says what you're saying. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Ein ritzoyni sheyehei pikdoini bi'ad acher." I don't want it to be by somebody else. So Rabbi Yochanan paskins like the Olam is saying, and we paskin that way. That Rabbi Yochanan says, "I want specifically for you to be the shomer, not him," and therefore conversation's over.
And the Rav, when Shimon gives it to Levi, does Shimon have to, or does Levi have to acknowledge that he's responsible to Reuben, as opposed to Levi just thinking, okay, Shimon's asking me to watch, or do you watch?
You mean, does he have to tell him that really
He has no idea
Levi?
he's watching it for Reuben.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe.
Why would you game it?
Because he's saying that maybe in Lumdis, you have to know who you're a shomer of.
Why? You're a shomer of this item. I don't care who owns it.
Yeah, I would think that you don't have to, but I understand what your point is, but I would think you don't have to. Okay? So next week we'll have to pick up on Rabbi Yochanan. What's the other shita? Okay? What does he argue on? Does he just argue on your point that you're saying or not? And then we'll get into some, it's going to take us a little bit still to get to Lalach Lamaisa, but we just introduced the sugya this week. All right? I see, not everyone got the message, so we got, but we introduced the sugya this week, and Mitzvah next week we'll come moving forward. Shkoyach. Okay, got it.